So when you're looking at the core, you need to look at it as a cylinder. So the upper portion of a cylinder will be your diaphragm muscle. So when you breathe, your diaphragm contracts. That's the top of the core. The base of the core is your pelvic floor muscles. Now, either side, we have our external obliques and our internal obliques. And then finally, anterior, we have the rectus abdominis, and on the posterior of our transverse abdominis. Now, that whole cylinder shape from top to bottom and 360 degrees, that is our core musculature. Now, that all needs to be trained. If you just train one portion, such as your rectus abdominis, you're going to lead to an imbalance and potential for injury down the line, just like any other muscle group. So you need to train the full amount of the core in its entirety. Now also, there is a section posteriorly in your back that adds additional support to the spine that we'll just touch on briefly. So it includes the obliques again down the side, but it's your thoracolumbar fascia predominantly, which is a series of connective tissue, as it explains there, crossing between your lumbar and lower thoracic spine. This fascia is connected to your lats, just slightly above it, the big muscles in your back, and it's also connected to your glutes, the large muscles in your bum, and as stated before, your obliques as well. So that creates an additional level of stability for the spine, but predominantly you're looking at working the core muscles, your rectus abdominis, transverse abdominis, internal and external obliques, diaphragm and pelvic floor muscles. Create a strong core from top to bottom, 360 degrees. So how do you do this? Well, if you want to train the core, ideally you want to be doing compound lifts, and if you're able to, do them under a load. Loaded compound lifts will train your core because you need your core to be stable to protect the spine. So I would integrate things such as squats, deadlifts, etc. to create that adaptation and strengthen the core. Isometric exercises are brilliant because with an isometric exercise you are strengthening the muscle without moving. You're locked into that position, which is what we want because we want stability for the spine. So things such as planks, side planks, etc. Them sort of exercises over doing sit-ups, because now you're not training the muscle to contract under flexion, but you're training it to contract whilst in a stable position. Training under all three planes of motion, so your frontal, sagittal and transverse plane of motion. So exercises such as a single arm farmer's walk, so you're preventing the body from going into lateral flexion. So this is a good example of using the frontal plane of motion, and it's going to be training your core to stay upright and stay stable. Sagittal plane of motion, a sagittal plane exercise such as a squat. So the squat you generally think of as working lower body, so your quads, hamstrings, glutes, etc. But it's also a great exercise for training the core because you're breathing and you're bracing the core and then creating that movement, and whilst you're moving certain joints and going through an isometric movement, the role of the core, you shouldn't be moving, it should be stable. You don't want spinal flexion. So breathing, bracing and going through a loaded movement like a squat is beneficial for your core stability and working the core muscles. Finally, transverse plane of motion, so this is your rotation. So if you are in a gym and you can get onto the pulley or the cable machine, walking it out and doing a rotation exercise, or equally an anti-rotation exercise where you don't allow movement, that can also strengthen the core, and then you're covering all three planes of motion. The reason I included the transverse is because if you're going into a sports specific type of training, then the core will end up going through movement rather than just isometrics, but that is far deeper than just the general role of the core. So yeah, we'll include that due to the fact that most people, or some people, will be taking it into a sport specific sphere, and therefore it can be beneficial. But yeah, so the role of the core in general, you want it to be nice and strong, 360 degrees, to protect and stabilise the spine. Okay, that will do us. If you have any more queries or questions or anything more you want to know, just leave a comment, shoot me a message, email, whatever you can. I'll try and get more videos out and more information and break it down further for you.